right, my darlings, I am back. You see that I still have this on there. Okay, so this was combining like terms, which is what we did yesterday. Today we are going to start solving one-step equations. Now, in order to do that, we have to know a few things. Now, this is just solving equations in general. So we're just going to do solving equations in general right now. And then we'll move to one step, okay? So there's a few things you have to understand with solving equations, okay? So the first thing you need to understand is to solve equations your goal is to get the variable all by itself. Okay? This is what Miss Long likes to say. The variable does not play well with others. Okay, so the variable does not play well with others. So it has to be by itself. Or in today, right now, what we're going through right now, we could say that you must quarantine. I think there's an A there. I think I misspelled it. You must quarantine the variable. Okay, we are quarantining the variable. It has to be quarantined. Plain and simple. Can't be with anybody else. It has to be quarantined. Has to have social distancing. Social distancing. Okay. Social distance. All right. So that's what you're going to be doing. Now, in order to do that, to complete the social distancing process, you will form 1 to 2 operations with the variable. Okay, so to complete the social distancing process, you will perform 1 to 2 operations with the variable. Okay? Now, what does this mean, Miss Long? I'm so glad you asked. This means you will either add, subtract, multiply, or divide a number to both sides sometimes doing 2 of those. Okay, so sometimes you'll have to do 2 of those. If it's a 1-step, we do it once. If it's a 2-step, we do twice, or we do 2 things, okay? So to complete the social distancing process, you will perform 1 to 2 operations. I'll give you time to finish copying that. Then I will continue. All right. So let's talk about how we know what to do. Remember back on day 1, and then last week when we were reviewing, we talked about this word called inverse. We're going to talk about it again. It's on our word wall, but we're going to talk about it again. What does inverse mean? Yeah. Inverse means opposite, right? That's what inverse means. It means opposite. So when you are doing this, when deciding what operation you must use to social distance your variable, you will use the inverse operation of the one you see in the problem. Okay? So you'll see the inverse operation. So remember, inverse means opposite. So let's talk about our operations. So let's look at our operations. If you see something that is being added, or is positive, then the inverse would be what? Subtraction. Okay? So if something's being added or it's positive, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to subtract, which is going to be our negative. If something is being subtracted or is negative, then the inverse would be to add, or would be the positive. Okay? What if something is being multiplied? If something is being multiplied, now, here's where you got to be careful. Something's going to be multiplied. They're not going to have a multiplication symbol between it. Okay? It's going to be sitting right on it. So it may look something like this. And I'm going to put it in parentheses. So it could be something like this. Like 2x. Okay? Anytime it's sitting right on it, this is multiplication. The inverse would be division. And then if something is being divided, in this case, it's going to look something like this. it goes again. So it'd be like x over 4. Okay, that's how they're going to show it. It's going to be in a fraction form. It's be like x over 4. So if something's being divided, then the inverse would be multiplication. Okay? All right. So that's what we mean by when we say we're going to use the inverse operation. If something's being added, we're going to subtract. If something's being subtracted, we're going to add. If something's being multiplied, we're going to divide. If something's being divided, we're going to multiply. All right? So now let's put that into the works. All right. X plus 4 equals -6. Now remember, we have to quarantine our variable. I'm boxing him off. He's got to be quarantined. So everybody's got to move away from him. Got to move far, far away. All right, so now what's going on right here? I'm going to write it out to the side. So what's going on right here is right now 4 is being added. To the variable, right? That's what's going on right now. That's what's going on right here. 4 is being added. So remember, to quarantine this x, to complete social distancing, we have to do the inverse operation. What is the inverse of addition? So this is what's going on. So how do we undo this? The second thing that we have to remember is the inverse of addition is subtraction. Now, remember what we've been talking about before. What you do on one side you must do on the other. Okay? So what you do on one side, you must do on the other. And pay attention to sign rules. All right? Pay attention to sign rules. So what you do on one side, you must do on the other, and you pay attention to sign rules. So the inverse of addition is subtraction. So right under here, right under this +4, I'm going to subtract 4. What I do on one side, I have to do on the other. I want you to draw a line right through that equals. This is one side, this is the other side. We've got to get this 4 on the other side of the wall so that we can quarantine the x. Okay, that's the only way we're going to have social distancing. So this 4 has to go over here. Well, the only way we can do that is the inverse operation. So we're going to subtract 4 from this side as well. What's 4 minus 4? It's 0. That's the whole point. We're trying to move it away. It has to get away from this x. So the x comes down. It's now by itself, which was the whole point. Now, I have a negative. I have a negative. My signs are the same. When my signs are the same, I add the numbers. So 6 plus 4 is 10, and I keep the sign. So my answer is x equals -10. That is your answer. Okay? All right, so that's that one. Let's do another one. Okay, here we go. Again, remember the variable has to be quarantined. So we're boxing the variable. Go ahead and draw your line. All right, now I flipped it up a little bit because I want to show you something. Remember I said if you're subtracting or it's negative. Here it's negative. What's the inverse of negative? Positive. So I'm going to add 3. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other. The whole point, get rid of this. We're social distancing. We're quarantining the variable. So y equals, now this is a negative, this is a positive. My signs are different. When my signs are different, I subtract. So I get a 2. And I keep the sign of the larger number. What's bigger, 5 or 3? 5 is bigger, its sign is negative, so my answer is y equals -2. So this is my answer. Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to do 2 more, and then we'll do more in class, so make sure you come to class. So we'll have some different examples. All right, now let's say we have something that looks like this. Now remember, we got to quarantine. That variable has to be quarantined. Got to social distance. I told you a minute ago, anytime you see a number sitting right on the variable, there's nothing in between them. This is multiplication, okay? This is multiplication. What's the opposite of multiplication? What's the inverse of multiplication? Division. I'm going to divide by whatever's in front of the variable, negative included. Everything has to go. It has to be quarantined by itself. So I'm going to divide by -4. I'm going to divide by -4. Anything divided by itself is 1. So x equals, remember, a negative divided by a negative is always positive. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. So my final answer is x equals 3. I bet you can't guess the last example I'm going to do. All right. Now, let's say you have this. I told you, anytime it's in a fraction like this, this is division. Okay? So this right here is division. So the opposite is multiplication. Now remember, we got to quarantine the variable. We have to social distance, so we got to get everything away from it. So now the opposite or the inverse of division is multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides by whatever's in the denominator. Okay? So you multiply both sides by the denominator. Okay, that's what you're going to do. So I'm going to multiply by 5 here. I'm going to multiply by 5 here. What happens? These 5s cancel out, which leaves me with A equals. A negative times a positive is always negative. We learned that with our sign rules. 2 times 5 is 10. So your answer is A equals -10. Okay? So those are all one-step equations. Tomorrow we're going to look at two-step equations. Alrighty?